Imagine a city, not built, not constructed, carved, cut from stone, lost for centuries, forgotten, and then found again. A city where 90% of it still waits beneath the earth. And when you stand before it, you feel yourself stepping into 2,000 years of silence. There are many ancient cities in the world, all of them collapsed, buried, forgotten in some way. But most are found in ruins, in piles of stone, beneath the soil, at the bottom of the sea. Petra is different. It was not destroyed. It was abandoned. And when its people left, they left behind walls, columns, temples, as if those who departed were expecting to return. Tonight, we are going there together. To the red rock cliffs of Jordan, to that extraordinary world that was carved, preserved, lost, and rediscovered. To Petra. Welcome to Atlas of the Night. Every week, this channel takes you to the deep, quiet, and mysterious corners of the world. You are here to let your mind travel to distant histories and distant lands before you sleep. If you have never been here before, this is a beautiful moment to subscribe. If you are ready, let us begin. Petra lies in the southwest of present-day Jordan, a plateau on the eastern edge of the Wadi Araba Valley, roughly 1,000 meters above sea level. Desert surrounds it on all sides. Summer temperatures can exceed 50 degrees. Rainfall throughout the year is extremely scarce. At first glance, it seems almost impossible to imagine that a great civilization could have taken root here. But this is precisely where history surprises us, time and time again. Humanity has chosen to create the most extraordinary things under the most difficult conditions. The muddy delta of Mesopotamia became the cradle of civilization. The narrow desert strip of the Nile witnessed the rise of the pyramids. And these red cliffs of Jordan became home to a city, unlike anything else in the world. This is what separates Petra from an ordinary ancient ruin, a will that refused to accept the limits of nature. When you look at the geography of the region, you see that the city is surrounded by natural walls on every side. High cliffs and deep valleys in every direction. To reach this place, you must cross these obstacles, and even after crossing them and arriving at the passes, moving forward without someone who knows the way is almost impossible. This geographical protection made Petra nearly impregnable from a military standpoint. The ancient historian Diodorus Siculus described the Nabataeans like this: "They live in mountains surrounded by desert. It is difficult to attack them, and a counterattack is impossible." These were not exaggerations. The generals of Alexander the Great attempted to assault the Nabataeans twice. Both times, they were forced to retreat. A small defensive force holding the narrow passes could stop a far larger army that dominated open ground. The earliest traces of people living in this landscape go back much further. There are signs of settlement in the Petra region dating back 12,000 years. Stone Age tools, early agricultural remains, and in the first millennium before our era, a powerful kingdom that arose here, the Edomites. Frequently mentioned in the Old Testament, this people maintained a relationship of both conflict and trade with the Israelites. Some researchers believe that when the Nabataeans arrived, they inherited the infrastructure the Edomites had left behind. But this is debated. What is certain is that the Nabataeans did not step into an empty land. They arrived in a place that carried thousands of years of human history. But this protection was not only military. Knowledge was protected too. The Nabataeans guarded their trade routes closely, and in particular, their water sources. In the desert, this knowledge was a matter of life and death. Whoever knew where to find water controlled the trade route, and the Nabataeans understood this balance very well. Allow outsiders to enter, but do not show them everything. Keep the door open, but hide the key. This is why Petra appeared both mysterious and unreachable from the outside. And that mystery, like the city itself, endured for centuries. The most important of the passes leading into the city was the Sikh. In Arabic, the word means shaft or narrow passage, and it describes that extraordinary natural canyon that opens into Petra. But the words narrow passage fall far short of capturing this place. The Sikh is roughly 1.5 kilometers long, in places only a few meters wide. But the rocky walls on either side rise to 80 meters. When you look up, you realize the sky has been reduced to a thin strip of blue. In certain hours, the sun cannot reach inside at all. The surfaces shift constantly between shadow and light. The rock faces inside the Sikh are works of art in themselves. Millions of years of geological processes have created layers of red, yellow, orange, and white within the stone. These colors blend and intertwine. Sometimes they look like brushstrokes on a canvas, sometimes like flames. The Nabataeans built their city directly over this natural painting. They took something already beautiful and made it even more so. As you walk through the Sikh, beneath your feet are ancient Nabataean paving stones. Over thousands of years, millions of steps have crossed these same stones. Merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, philosophers, children, elders, all of them walked over the same stones. All of them looked at the same rock faces as they passed through the same narrow canyon. Perhaps they all felt the same thing, that they stood at the threshold of something extraordinary, something that resisted description. There is something particular about the air in the Sikh. When you enter from outside, the temperature drops. You feel moisture. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of water dripping from the rock. The wind sometimes hums, as if coming from somewhere very far away, very deep. It sounds as though it rises from within the stone itself. The Sikh has its own voice, and that voice has not changed in thousands of years. If you look closely while walking through the Sikh, you will notice grooves and channels carved into the surface of the rock. Some of these are part of the Nabataean water infrastructure, channels that collected rainwater from the highlands and hillsides and carried it into the city ran partly through the Sikh. Ancient engineering, inscribed into the walls of this narrow passage. The rock served as both road and water system, and at times you will find small Nabataean inscriptions on the rock faces above. Most are prayers dedicated to gods, or sentences of blessing for someone setting out on a journey. 2,000 years ago, someone passing through carved something into this rock. Perhaps they were leaving on a trade journey and asking their god for protection. Perhaps they were returning and offering thanks. We do not know this person's name, but their hands are still there. And then the passage slowly widens, a few meters, and in those few meters, something red appears on the horizon. Enormous, columned, as if the rock itself has transformed into a palace. The Treasury. In Arabic, al-Khazna means treasury, and it has become the symbol of Petra, roughly 40 meters tall and 28 meters wide. Carved entirely from pink-red sandstone from a single mass of rock. Looking at the facade, you see the influences of Hellenistic architecture. columns, a frieze, a semicircular arch, winged figures at the very top. These figures are the tangible evidence of the unique dialogue Nabataean art conducted with Greek mythology. For centuries, the local population believed a great treasure was hidden inside this structure. There was a strong belief that gold and jewels were concealed within the large stone urn at the top of the facade. Because of this belief, the surface of the urn is covered in bullet marks. They had fired at it to release the treasure within. Of course, there was nothing inside, but this belief preserved the structure's mystical place in popular memory for many years. The true function of the treasury is still not definitively known. Recent archaeological findings in front of it have revealed tomb remains and ritual objects. It was most likely a monumental tomb or a funerary space. Who it was built for remains debated, but it is believed to date from the reign of the first or fourth Aretas. Inside the treasury, there is almost nothing. A large chamber, flat walls, raw stone floors. This emptiness has always surprised visitors because of the contrast it creates with the splendor outside. The exterior so magnificent, the interior so plain. This contrast perhaps reflects the Nabataean understanding. The funeral ceremony happened outside. The real meaning was within. But Petra is not a single structure. The number of structures identified by researchers to date exceeds 800. Temples, tombs, palaces, bathhouses, an amphitheater, churches, market spaces. A large portion are carved directly into the rock or built in integration with rock facades. The group known as the Royal Tombs consists of enormous facades carved into the cliffs north of the treasury. The Urn Tomb, the Silk Tomb, the Corinthian Tomb, the Palace Tomb. Each was built in a different era for a different Nabataean noble or ruler. The facades are in different styles, but every one of them carries that same extraordinary mastery of stone carving. The Silk Tomb takes its name from the remarkable play of color in the rock. Pink, purple, red, and yellow stripes together, as if transformed into silk fabric. None of this color was painted. It is entirely geological. Minerals laid down over millions of years created these lines. The Nabataeans carved their structure directly onto this natural painting, as if they placed the final signature on a work nature had already completed. The facade of the Urn Tomb stands roughly 20 meters high, and inside is a large chamber. During the Byzantine period, this chamber was converted into a church. The walls still carry the traces of that transformation. The same space, first a Nabataean monumental tomb, then a Christian church. A small but perfect summary of Petra's layered history. The structure known as the monastery, Adair, is even larger than the treasury, 45 meters tall and 50 meters wide. To reach this structure, carved into a mountainside, you must climb approximately 800 steps. The ascent is demanding, but the view that opens before you and the structure itself more than repay the effort. On the interior walls are Byzantine-era cross-reliefs. For the Nabataeans, this was likely a ceremonial space or a votive site for a deified king. In later centuries, it was converted into a church. When you sit on the wide, flat ground just in front of the monastery, there is endless silence around you. Valleys below, desert in the distance, and behind you, a 45-meter rock facade. Of all Petra's structures, the sense of solitude and immensity felt at this point may be the most intense. The high place of sacrifice is carved onto one of the city's highest points. When you climb up here, all of Petra opens beneath your feet. The cliffs, the valleys, the desert beyond, and at the center of that place, altars carved into flattened rock. Here the Nabataeans performed their rituals, made their offerings, prayed to their gods. At sunset, when the light falls across these altar stones, the stones take on the color of blood. The colonnaded street was the spine of the city. Lined on both sides by columns, this street connected market areas, temples, and public buildings. The column fragments still standing today show how large and magnificent this street once was. And at the end of this street rose the city's greatest temple, Qasr al-Bint. Unlike the others, this was not carved from rock, but built from stone blocks, and it was dedicated to the chief Nabataean deity, Dushara. So who built this city? And how? The civilization that brought Petra to its greatest era, the Nabataeans. Appearing on the historical stage in the 4th century before our era, these people were originally a nomadic or semi-nomadic group that came from northern Arabia. In the beginning, they traveled with caravans, traded, and raised animals. But in time, they realized something. Controlling trade routes was far more profitable than trading directly, and Petra was placed at the center of that strategy. In that era, Petra was one of the most important commercial crossroads in the world. Frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia were as valuable as gold in the ancient world. These resins were used in temples, palaces, and funeral ceremonies. Spices from India were equally precious. Black pepper, ginger, cinnamon, cardamom. In ancient Rome, a bag of black pepper carried considerable worth. Ivory came from Africa. Glass and textiles from the Eastern Mediterranean. Papyrus and grain from Egypt. All of these goods reached the Mediterranean world through Petra. The Nabataeans collected taxes from these caravans, provided lodging, sold water and provisions, offered guidance, and gradually they became active traders themselves. In the 1st century before our era, Nabataean merchants were recognized names in many ports of the Mediterranean. In the Greek and Roman records that describe them, they appear as wealthy, intelligent, and supremely practical people. There is substantial evidence that the Nabataeans were more than merchants. Their language formed the foundation of Nabataean script, which is considered the ancestor of the modern Arabic alphabet. This writing system spread across the Middle East over time and directly influenced the development of the Arabic alphabet as we know it today. Every person who reads Arabic is a Ma'us, in a sense, carrying the Nabataean legacy. The ceramics they produced are also remarkable. They made extraordinarily thin and lightweight vessels. These pieces are so delicate, they are sometimes described as being light as an eggshell. Today, archaeologists use this distinctive pottery as one of the most certain indicators of Nabataean presence at any site. They also farmed. To farm on this desert plateau is itself an achievement. On the surrounding hillsides, through terracing and rainwater collection systems, they established vineyards. Nabataean wine was recognized and appreciated across the Mediterranean world of its time. Olives and grain were also cultivated. The ancient Nabataean agricultural fields in the Negev desert are still being studied today. These systems were designed to use rainwater at maximum efficiency, to turn a little into a lot. This may be the least known but most impressive achievement of Nabataean civilization. The political history of the Nabataean kingdom is also rich. The first Nabataean king, whose name we know today, is Aretas I. But it was Aretas IV who led the kingdom's golden age. Ruling for 49 years, from 9 years before our era to 40 years after, this created Petra's most brilliant era, both politically and architecturally. During his reign, the city grew, new structures were added, and trade expanded. There is an interesting detail on Nabataean coins. Many kings are depicted not alone, but together with their queens. This practice, unusual among the states of the Middle East at the time, suggests that women held a relatively high status in Nabataean society. In some tomb inscriptions, women are seen conducting commercial transactions, owning property, and drawing up legal documents in their own names. This represents a social structure far ahead of its time. The Nabataeans governed a wide geography. Extending into present-day Saudi Arabia, this territory included the Hejaz region and important trade routes. Basra in the south of Syria also fell under Nabataean influence during a period. This network connecting dozens of cities, caravanserais, and water stations formed one of the most sophisticated logistics systems in the ancient world. Their relationship with Rome was at times alliance, at times tension. But the Nabataeans preferred diplomacy over direct confrontation with greater powers. This strategy bought them centuries of independence. And then, at last, time ran out. In the year 106, during the reign of Emperor Trajan, Roman armies entered Nabataean territory. Exactly what happened is still unclear. A battle? A peaceful surrender? The quiet end of a kingdom already weakened by internal conflicts? The ancient sources are insufficient on this point, but the outcome is clear. The Nabataean kingdom came to an end, and the territory was transformed into a Roman province called Arabia Petraea. Petra became the capital of this new province. The Romans did not destroy Petra. On the contrary, they developed it. They widened the colonnaded street, built new temples, erected a triumphal arch. Nabataean traditions did not disappear entirely. The old temples retained their function. The Nabataean language was still spoken. But new structures were built in the language of Roman architecture. In this transitional period, Petra uniquely carried both Nabataean and Roman identities at the same time. Where did the Nabataeans go? A people do not vanish overnight. When control passed to Rome, the Nabataeans did not disappear. Their culture, their language, and their traditions continued. But slowly, generation by generation, they dissolved into larger cultural identities. Nabataean was spoken less and less. Aramaic and Greek came to the fore. The Nabataean identity, over a few centuries, blended into larger pools. But what they left behind was not erased. Especially the alphabet. That legacy is still being written today. So how did the Nabataeans live in this city? During the city's most brilliant era, between the 1st century before our era and the 1st century after, the population of Petra is estimated to have been between 20,000 and 30,000. Some researchers believe the number may have been higher. To build a city of this size on a desert plateau is, by itself, an extraordinary achievement. Imagine stepping out onto the colonnaded street in the early morning. Merchants setting up their stalls. The bells of camels drifting in from somewhere distant. Foreign traders who spent the night at the caravanserai, venturing out to explore the city. Shop owners greeting their neighbors. Children running through a narrow alley. Smoke rising from a temple. the scent of spices hanging in the air. By midday, the market crowd has reached its peak. An Indian merchant is negotiating a price with a Nabataean wholesaler. Beside them, an interpreter who speaks both languages fluently. In a corner, a man dressed in Roman clothing whispers with an Egyptian colleague. In another corner, two elderly Nabataean women debate the quality of the olive oil they just bought at the market. Every day on Petra's streets, an entire world came together. As evening descended, performances began at the amphitheater. The voices of 8,000 people echoed off the rock walls. A Greek tragedy? A local musical ensemble? We do not know. But that sound bounced and spread through the cliffs. There are ancient records confirming that the Nabataeans loved music and dance. In the middle of the desert, inside those red rocks, fires burned and music rose. This scene was real. It truly happened 2,000 years ago. In the different quarters of the city, different communities lived side by side. Alongside the Nabataeans, there were Greeks, Egyptians, Arabs, Jews, and Roman merchants who also resided here. Different languages were spoken, different gods were prayed to, different clothes were worn. Petra was a cosmopolitan city. Perhaps this is why its architecture is so layered, bearing the imprint of so many cultures. There were bathhouses in the city, not only for washing, but for socializing and conducting business. At the amphitheater, which held roughly 8,000 people, performances and gatherings took place. Imagine the sound of 8,000 voices echoing off the rock walls. And in those magnificent cliffs, fires burned and music rose. And at the center of this city, there was something more important than anything else: water. The Nabataeans lived in the desert. Rainfall was extremely scarce. But in winter and spring, there could be sudden, violent downpours, flash floods, uncontrolled torrents. These two extremes existed in the same landscape. In summer, drought and blazing sun. In winter, floodwater capable of sweeping everything away in minutes. To survive these conditions, strength alone was not enough. Intelligence was required. To solve this dilemma, the Nabataeans built one of the most sophisticated ancient water management systems in history. Inside the Psyche, running along the surface of the rock on both sides, are carved channels. These are not decorative. These channels carried rainwater collected from the highlands and hillsides into the city. The gradient of the channels was calculated with extraordinary precision. Steep enough to keep the water moving, but measured enough to prevent it from getting out of control. Some sections were open channels. Others were covered with fired clay pipes. These pipes kept the water clean and reduced evaporation. Once the water finally reached the city, it filled cisterns carved into the rock. Some of these cisterns could hold tens of thousands of liters. The number of cisterns identified in and around Petra exceeds 100. Some are small, intended for individual use. Others are large neighborhood cisterns for communal use. A cistern near every home. Water access at every street corner. This was not only a technical solution, it was an urban planning decision. At the entrance to the Psyche, there was also a dam system, built to prevent sudden floodwaters from entering the canyon and damaging the city. The remains of this dam are still visible today. Historical records tell us that the Sikh suffered flood damage on multiple occasions. This dam was built to prevent exactly that threat. Thanks to this system, Petra was able to sustain 30,000 people in the middle of the desert. This required not only engineering, but organization, planning, and social coordination. The people who built and maintained it had chosen not to conquer the desert, but to govern its rules. The Nabataean building technique was also distinctive. In the ancient world, great structures were built from stone blocks. The Egyptian pyramids were built this way. Roman temples were built this way. But the Nabataeans did the opposite. They started from the rock above and worked downward. Cutting from the summit of the mountain down, the ceiling was revealed first. Then the walls descended. Then the floor emerged. This method required no scaffolding. The craftsmen were already standing on the surface they were working. There was no room for error either. Stone carved away could not be put back, which means Nabataean craftsmen had to see the completed structure in their minds before they ever began to cut. Iron hammers and chisels, centimeter by centimeter. Completing a large facade may have taken decades. Perhaps one generation began, and the next completed it. When you consider the 40-meter height of the Treasury, those columns, those friezes and figures, this reality takes on a different meaning. The people who built it never saw it finished. They left it incomplete, and their grandchildren completed it. What kind of trust, what kind of patience does that require? Sandstone was both a gift and a challenge for the Nabataeans. The gift. Sandstone is relatively soft and easy to work. The challenge? Precisely because of that. Its ease of carving meant it was also easily worn, which means these structures have been changing slowly from the very moment they were built. Surfaces gradually smoothing out, details fading, colors shifting. Experts who study the facade of the Treasury today estimate with some sadness how much detail has been lost from the original surface over 2,000 years. What has been erased in all that time? But the wearing also brings its own beauty. The color of sandstone changes constantly with time and with light. Pink in the morning, red at midday, burning orange in the evening. Anyone who sees this change understands that Petra is not simply stone. It is something alive, a little different every day. The Nabataean religious world was also remarkably distinctive. Their chief god, Dushara, was the deity of mountains and the sun. But Dushara was never depicted in human or animal form. Instead, rectangular or square-cut stone blocks were used as his symbol. This abstract approach to representation was highly unusual compared to other Near Eastern religions of the time. Not drawing the god, but allowing the god to exist within stone. Their goddess Al-Uzza was associated with fertility, protection, and war. Over time, she was identified with the Greek goddess Aphrodite. They absorbed religious elements from Egyptian, Greek, and Roman cultures and blended them with their own beliefs to create an entirely new synthesis. This openness was reflected in their architecture too. In Petra, it is possible to find Egyptian cornices, Greek columns, Nabataean stonework, and Roman spatial planning, all within the same structure. A civilization that took much from the world, but never lost its identity. If you have been enjoying this journey so far, and you want Atlas of the Night to take you to places like this every week, this is a beautiful moment to subscribe. Subscribe, turn on notifications. Do not miss a single journey. But the real threat to Petra was not war. The real threat came far more quietly. The trade routes were changing. From the 2nd century onward, maritime trade began to gain importance. Spices and precious goods were now being carried not overland, but by ship, across the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea. This change was slow but relentless. It did not happen overnight. But year by year, Petra's strategic position became a little less meaningful. First, the caravans thinned. Then the number of merchants fell. Markets contracted. Tax revenues dried up. The economic engine that kept the city alive began to slow. These kinds of deaths are far more sorrowful because no one intended it. If a city is destroyed by war, the responsible party is clear. But in the shifting of a trade route, there is no one to blame. Life simply began to flow in another direction. Imagining what Petra looked like during this slow decline is difficult, but fascinating. The once crowded colonnaded street gradually emptying, some shops closing, some houses abandoned. In one corner of the market, where 100 stalls once stood, now only 10 remain. But life is still going on. People are still there, just fewer of them. And then, in the 4th century, a great earthquake came. The earthquake of the year 363 is recorded as one of the most devastating natural disasters in the region's history. Many of Petra's structures were damaged or completely destroyed. Part of the water system ceased to function. The population began to shrink. Wealth diminished. There was no money left for maintenance and repair. But the city was not entirely abandoned. This is important. Petra continued to live, even if diminished and transformed. During the Byzantine period, it was home to a small but active community. Christianity had become the dominant religion. Some of the old Nabataean temples were converted into churches. Well-preserved mosaics were discovered in a church found in Petra. These mosaics are extraordinary, colorful, detailed, and remarkably well-preserved after 15 centuries. Papyrus documents found in the same church offer unique glimpses into daily life in the 6th century. From these documents, it is clear that a small but active community existed. Property was being bought and sold. Marriages were being arranged. Disputes were being brought before the courts. Life continued. In the 7th century, with the spread of Islam, the region changed hands. Petra was no longer a trading center or an important administrative hub. In the 12th century, the Crusaders built a fortress near Petra. Its remains can still be seen today. And after that, Petra disappeared completely from European eyes. It was erased from the map. Some European travelers and scholars had heard rumors of a lost city in this region, but no one had managed to find it, or had the courage to try, because there was still a force protecting Petra. The Badul tribe. The Badul tribe lived for centuries in the cliffs and caves of Petra. For them, this place was not an archaeological site. It was home. They pitched their tents in the wide open ground before the Treasury. They used the rock hollows as bedrooms and kitchens. They lit fires, raised animals, brought up children. And they did not readily let outsiders in. The presence of the Badul tribe in Petra is the strongest evidence that this city never truly died. For them, the Treasury was not a historical structure. It was a neighbor. The monastery was not a tourist landmark. It was shelter. The Syke was not an exploration route. It was the path of daily life. These people knew every corner of Petra. They knew which hollow collected water, which passage carried a cold wind, which cave stayed warm in winter. Their presence ensured the city continued to exist physically. Today, the Bdul tribe lives in the village of Sayhun, near Petra, at the request of the Jordanian government. But many of them still work inside the city, as guides, as vendors, as camel owners, and their knowledge runs deeper than anything modern archaeologists could obtain on their own. Some researchers say some of their most interesting discoveries came from information shared by members of the Bdul community. This is why Johann Ludwig Burckhardt had to travel in disguise. In the year 1812, Burckhardt was traveling through this region, a Swiss-born academic and explorer. He had set out on a long journey to study the Arab world. He spoke Arabic flawlessly, had studied Islam in depth, and traveled under the name Sheikh Ibrahim, posing as a local Muslim scholar. Maintaining this disguise required constant vigilance every day. The information he gathered from local people pointed to the existence of ancient ruins hidden somewhere within these cliffs. But no one was willing to take him there. Outsiders were not welcome. In the end, he found a strategy. It was known that the tomb of the prophet Aaron was located in the region. He said he wished to visit this tomb as a pilgrim. This intention was considered acceptable, and he managed to hire a guide. He entered the Sikh. He made his way through that narrow canyon, through that rocky passage. Perhaps he was entering a moment he had imagined for days. His guide watched him closely, observing his every movement. Burckhardt was trying to appear calm. What he felt inside, we cannot know with certainty. But anticipation, curiosity, and fear were most likely all present together. And then he came out before the Treasury. Consider that moment. A structure that no one in Europe had seen, that no one could confirm as real. Inside the rock, a colossal facade. Columns, figures, urns, sunlight falling across it. The color red, orange, pink. Burckhardt stopped. How long he stood there, we do not know. But in that stillness, he understood that he was standing at the gate of one of the greatest lost cities in the world. He kept careful notes. He recorded what he saw, discreetly. He did not dare go too deep inside. He feared his identity would be discovered. But what he had seen left him shaken even hours after he had come back out. In that brief, disguised visit, he had reached the door of one of the world's lost cities. These notes were published in the year 1822, and Europe's interest in this lost city was rekindled. Researchers began reaching the region. Each faced their own difficulties. The local population still regarded them with suspicion. Some were met with weapons. Some had to pay a high price to enter. But over time, Petra became a genuine center of scholarly study in the European scientific world. Systematic drawings were made, inscriptions were copied, photographs were taken. From the late 19th century onward, scholarly visits became more regular, and from the early 20th century, real archaeological excavations began. Today, research teams from dozens of countries continue working in different areas of Petra. American, French, British, German, Italian, and Jordanian archaeologists. New discoveries every year. Every year, our understanding deepens a little further. And this fact has not changed. 90% of Petra still lies beneath the earth. In the year 2016, a study using satellite imagery and geophysical surveys detected an enormous platform structure south of the known Petra site. This structure, measuring approximately 56 by 48 meters, appeared to carry rows of columns on its surface. What it was used for is unknown. it has still not been excavated. That is a single example. Archaeologists have still not found the royal archives of the Nabataeans. Every important ancient state kept records: treaties, tax registers, religious texts, poems, letters. Such documents have been found from Rome, from Egypt, from Mesopotamia, and they have fundamentally transformed our understanding of history. But the number of documents that have survived from the Nabataeans is extremely small. In all likelihood, these documents are somewhere underground, waiting. If this archive is ever discovered, history will certainly be rewritten. What else is down there? Which chambers? Which corridors? Which inscriptions? Which figures are still sleeping beneath that red earth? Perhaps the next generation will find the answers. Petra today is Jordan's largest source of tourism revenue. Every year, close to 1 million visitors pass through the Sikh, stand before the Treasury, and climb to the monastery. It is on the UNESCO World Heritage List. In 2007, it was selected as one of the new 7 wonders of the world. And since the Indiana Jones film, its cultural iconic status has only grown stronger. But this number of visitors is also a threat. The sandstone surfaces that millions of footsteps cross every year are slowly eroding. Water seepage is damaging the foundations of structures. In 2004, a major flash flood in the Sikh cost the lives of several tourists. Some historic structures have already partially collapsed. The Jordanian government and international organizations run restoration projects, but the area to be protected is vast, and resources are limited. Perhaps Petra's greatest paradox is this: it needs to be seen in order to exist. But the more it is seen, the more it slowly wears away. The experiences of people who visit Petra vary enormously. Some sit down in front of a cave and do not move for hours. Some photograph everything, but never truly see any of it. Some climb to the monastery, and up there, at the top, find themselves crying without knowing why. Many people cry. This is not strange. What Petra does at times is this: it confronts you with your own smallness. These rocks stood here for 2,000 years before you arrived. They will most likely stand here for 2,000 years after you are gone. And you are, in this moment, a brief point between the two. Feeling this truth sometimes turns into tears. Perhaps this is the greatest gift Petra offers: perspective. The awareness of how small a fraction of time your own life occupies. This smallness is not sad. On the contrary, it is reassuring, because those rocks are still standing against everything. And you too, in some small way, are part of that immensity. To truly understand Petra, perhaps you need to imagine it at different hours. At sunrise, the Sikh is still dark and damp. The first light begins to filter down from the tops of the cliffs, the color orange, then gold, then red. No one is in front of the Treasury, only that rock facade and the silence of the morning. At this hour, Petra feels as if it has returned 2,000 years into the past. At midday, it is different. Tourists stream through the Sikh. Children run. Vendors open their stalls. This too is familiar in its own way. The midday Petra resembles the most crowded hours of the ancient city. Only the clothes have changed. Only the languages have changed. And at night, it is something else entirely. On some evenings, Petra opens for a night walk. Hundreds of candles placed along the Sikh. Music in front of the Treasury. The cliffs in deep shadow under dim light. And that ancient silence fills again, but this time carrying a different meaning. Cities usually die by war or by fire, but what killed Petra was far quieter. The changing of the routes, trade shifting to other paths, earthquakes slowly breaking things apart, people migrating elsewhere. No one intended it. Life simply flowed in another direction, and the cliffs remained. With the chambers carved into them, the channels, the columns, the temples. The wind continued to move through those corridors. The sun continued to filter through the top of the sick each morning. Centuries passed. The Bedul tribe lived there. Burkhardt passed through. Archaeologists dug. And tonight, you are listening. This too is a transmission. This too is a form of preservation. Perhaps the reason Petra is still here is that in every generation, there has been someone to carry it forward. When you look at the cliffs, you are not seeing only stone. You are seeing the hands of thousands of people. Their hammers, their chisels, their foreheads. Craftsmen working by firelight in the darkness of the night. Think of one of those craftsmen rising early in the morning, trying to complete the upper frieze of the Treasury, striking the stone with a chisel, giving it form. Going home in the evening. Eating, sleeping, coming back the next morning. This routine continuing for years, perhaps for decades. For that person, this may have been an ordinary job. But every strike they left behind has been there for 2,000 years. And those craftsmen never imagined that this city would one day be abandoned, buried, and rediscovered centuries later by strangers from the other side of the world. But the rock remained, still red and patient, standing there. At the end of the sick, depending on the angle of the sun, sometimes glowing gold, and sometimes burning blood red. It continues to wait. Perhaps this is why Petra, once seen, can never be forgotten. Because those rocks tell not just the story of a city, but of something that refused to yield to time. And inside that resistance, there is still so much hidden. We have reached the end of tonight's journey, from the entrance of the sick to the face of the Treasury, from the Nabataean water channels to the undiscovered chambers beneath the earth, from the rediscovery of a lost city to the quiet it holds today. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this kind of deep, quiet, and distant travel does you good, and you want Atlas of the Night to take you somewhere like this every week, subscribe to the channel. Every video is here so that before you sleep, you can see a little more of a corner of the world. Turn on notifications. Do not miss the next journey. Slowly close your eyes. Imagine the entrance to the sick. That narrow stone corridor. The light filtering down from above. The sand beneath your feet. The silence that wraps around you like something ancient and alive. 2,000 years of stillness, pressing gently from both sides. You are walking. Slowly. The walls rise around you. 80 meters of red stone, reaching toward a thin strip of sky. The air is cooler here, quieter. The world outside no longer exists. And then, the passage widens. Just a few meters. But in those few meters, something appears. Enormous, patient, carved not by machines or armies, but by human hands. One chisel strike at a time, across generations who never saw it finished. The Treasury, standing exactly as it has stood for 2,000 years, Not waiting to be discovered, not waiting to be admired. Just standing, the way mountains stand, the way time stands. You stop in front of it. You do not need to say anything. You do not need to do anything. You are here, and for this moment, that is enough. The rocks around you have held this silence since before you were born. They will hold it long after you are gone. And somewhere in that span of time, this brief moment, you, here, now, is also part of the story. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the day fall away. You are not in a hurry. You never were. The treasury is still there when you close your eyes. It will still be there when you open them again. Good night if these journeys help you sleep, help you slow down, help you feel something quiet and vast before the day ends. Share the channel with someone who needs it. Subscribe, turn on notifications. Every week there is a new place waiting, a new story, a new night. Atlas of the Night will be here.